Earlier this month, we introduced a brand new export integration to probably the simplest but most highly requested note-taking app of all time, Apple Notes. Thanks to this integration, you can now automatically export all of your highlights from your favorite books, articles, podcasts, and more directly to the Notes app without having to manually copy and paste them or set up some type of specialized shortcut. In this video, I'm going to teach you how to set up this export, as well as answer some of the common questions I've seen floating around online since we first launched this integration. To get started, the first thing you're going to want to make sure you've done is imported all of your highlights to Readwise. Now, if you've been with Readwise for a while, you probably already have everything connected, but if you're brand new, you can import all of your highlights by going to Connect and Sync and then heading to this import page. On this page, you can connect and import highlights from over 30 different sources, including those from Kindle, Pocket, Twitter, as well as our very own Read It Later app called Reader, which is included in your Readwise free trial, as well as your full Readwise subscription. You'll also notice that we have this really cool option to import highlights from paper books using the Readwise mobile app on your phone. To start exporting, you'll head to this export page, locate Apple Notes, and then install the Mac exporter tool based on your specific hardware. As of right now, the Apple Notes API will only allow us to connect and initiate exports on desktop computers where the Notes app is installed. Unfortunately, if you're on a PC computer, which doesn't allow you to install the Apple Notes app on your desktop, you will need to manually set up shortcuts using either your iPhone or your iPad. Fortunately, we have a longtime Readwise community member, Harley Stagner, who wrote a full in-depth tutorial on how to set up these shortcuts, which I'll link in the description below for any PC users who may be watching this. Our hope is that in the future, Apple will expand its API so you can initiate highlight syncing from your mobile device as well as your PC computer. Then when that happens, I will come back and I will update this video. Okay, so as you can see, I've gone ahead and installed the Readwise Apple Notes installer and opened it up on my MacBook. I'm now going to connect my Readwise account. This happened pretty fast since I previously connected, but if this is your first time installing and connecting, it might take a couple minutes. So the first option you'll see here is to automatically export and sync all of your highlights anytime you open the Notes app on your desktop computer. If you want full control over what's showing up and when, I would personally recommend just leaving this toggled off. Next up, you'll see this option to configure how often your highlights are exported. So you can have this done manually, in which case, if you want to export your highlights to Notes, you will either need to open up this tool and click Initiate Sync, or you can toggle this option on and manually open up the Notes app. You can also set this to export every hour, every 12 hours, once every 24 hours, or once every week. Next, you'll see the option to pick an account. In my situation, I only have one account, which is my iCloud, and this is ideal because anything I sync to my iCloud will then also show up on my phone. That said, I know some people have multiple Notes accounts, so you should choose the one that is best fitted for you. Next up, you can customize the base folder name. So this is the folder that appears inside your Notes app, under which all of your exported highlights will appear. For example, you could rename this something called Highlights and give it a little emoji. And then lastly, you can customize your formatting options. So I'm going to click on this and it will take me into the Apple Notes export settings within your Readwise account. So the first option you'll see here is to include highlight locations. I'll demonstrate for you what this looks like in practice in a couple seconds, but basically if you have this toggled on, we will include a hyperlink to the highlight location either within Reader or Kindle. Next up is including book covers. I recommend having this turned on just because it looks pretty. And then lastly, you'll see this option to select which items are exported. You can toggle this off and we'll just export every single highlight you've ever taken and imported into Readwise, but I would personally recommend toggling this on and then manually going through here and choosing which documents and which highlights you specifically want exported to your Notes app. So I'm going to do that right now. Okay, so I've gone in and selected all of the documents whose highlights I want to export to my Notes app. I'm now going to open this back up and click on Initiate Sync. Okay, my sync is now complete. I'm going to go ahead and open up the Notes app. And as you'll see here, I have this new folder titled Readwise, where we've exported all of your selected documents with their relevant highlights. One thing you might notice when you first run your sync is that the cover images for your different documents are missing. Typically, these take a little while longer to sync over as opposed to just text. So if you don't see these show up immediately, don't freak out, they will come over shortly. Okay, so all of my document images have now come over into the Notes app, and this is what your exported highlights look like. You will notice up top here, we've exported the metadata, so things like the author, the full title of the document, as well as the document category. This could be books, this could be articles, PDFs, etc. And then if you happen to be reading and highlighting inside of the Reader app, we've also exported the document summary for you. This is what the actual formatting of the exported highlights look like. In my case, I was using something called inline tagging while I read, and so I was actually able to export the chapters as well as subheadings into my Notes app. If you're interested in learning more about inline tags, I will link a little tutorial down below. By default, we will also export any added annotations as well as tags that you've applied to your highlights. This is an example of an exported book inside of Apple Notes, but if you were to export something like an online web article, we've also included things like the original document URL if you wanted to open up the original. In this case, I also tagged this document inside of Reader, and so you will see my document tags reflected here at the top. You'll also notice these location links, which I mentioned earlier, and these are particularly useful if you are doing most of your reading inside of Reader, because if you click on them, we will hyperlink directly to that specific highlight inside of the larger context of the full document inside of your Reader account. Similarly, if you click on these location links on your phone, it'll launch the Reader mobile app. One of the other common questions we've gotten with this integration is whether or not users can create subfolders based on their document category type. As of right now, we don't support creating automatic subfolders inside of your export, but if you are interested in having a little bit more structure, you can of course go ahead and create manual folders underneath the larger Readwise export. So here's what it would look like if I were to manually create these subfolders and then individually drag documents into those subfolders. Fair warning though, if you do create these different subfolders, it will break the sync. This isn't such a big deal if you're reading shorter form content in one sitting, like an article, and you finish taking all your highlights and annotations. But if you're working your way through a longer piece of content that you're continually adding highlights to, moving this document into a subfolder will mean that any new highlights you take on it will be exported to a brand new duplicate of that document in this top level Readwise folder. Everything I demonstrated in this tutorial is obviously on desktop, but as I mentioned earlier, if you are connecting to an iCloud account, all of these exported highlights will also sync over to the Apple Notes app on your iPhone and your iPad. So this is just one of the latest ways you can use Readwise to get more value out of your reading. If you enjoyed this video and you want to build a consistent reading habit this year, you should check out this tutorial next.